Is there a war on stand-up comedy? A whole bunch of recent mini controversies have been landing popular comedians in lukewarm to hot water on social media. On this week's Dude Soup, we're discussing if the public is just making it impossible to do stand-up in 2019. Welcome. Every time.
Every week. What about lightning bolt? And the fist grabs the lightning bolt and like takes the lightning bolt and smashes it through a mountain. And then the mountain crumbles away and then it reveals us sitting at the table.
Just give me 4 weeks.
Great.
I mean, so people have made them on the subreddit. I feel like we could probably
just steal one.
Yeah.
No one will never.
Well, they kind of offered them up.
We'll call it a contest.
Yeah.
We go, winner gets a $20 gift card.
Things because of manpower, things don't move very quickly here in the studio.
No.
That's why we have a friends set sitting right over where I'm looking.
Yeah.
That we've done nothing with.
Yeah.
We should. And I just drove by a fountain the other day and I was like, oh, we could shoot it there.
A fountain?
Well, there's a fountain nearby the office. It's a pretty famous fountain.
Where is that fountain?
LMU.
The
Friends fountain is in Burbank.
Oh.
We could
On
go
the
shoot.
lot, though,
yeah,
right?
but
Yeah.
you'd have to. Here's the thing,
We have
though.
to break into our parent company's lot,
Our parent company owns the lot.
which means we're allowed in there.
Yeah, I believe that's what that means.
Maybe. I don't know.
I think we're entitled to that.
Look, we don't have a lot of time.
Exactly. This episode of Dude Soup is sponsored by Hims, Honey, and Squarespace. Thank you for sponsoring Dude Soup. We will hear more about them later. But first up, talking about stand-up, basically a bunch of recent stand-up comedy specials have been controversial. This is via Cheat Sheet. Jokes in David Chappelle's Sticks and Stones were recently described as misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, and downright exhausting. Another review said it basically starts with Chappelle making jokes about the two men who made sexual abuse allegations against Michael Jackson in the HBO documentary Leaving Neverland that aired in January. They seemed to side with Jackson and said that even if the accusers are being truthful, they should feel honored to have been molested by such an icon. Which is
laughing already.
He basically does say that, and it reads way worse than. So you and I have both watched it. When he's saying it,
I've watched it as well.
That's a dark joke, but
it doesn't read. He doesn't sound that bad.
It's almost as though performance is part of comedy.
Yeah.
And when you have text, it doesn't convey it.
It sounds
I
brutal.
haven't watched it yet, but that joke makes me laugh, but that's not something.
Sometimes also like you're reading it in a very clinical way, and sometimes when someone's relaying a joke in that way, like or an absurd piece of information, that's funny. So like the way that you read it, and you read it as like this is a factual thing, but it's so absurd, is funny as well.
I think it's even how you hear it. That whole bit, which is basically kind of how he starts his special. He says he does believe. He thinks Michael Jackson is innocent, and I just kind of assumed he was lying. I was like, I think he's saying that for the bit, but I don't actually think he thinks that or is advocating for that.
He's setting up because if he went like, no, I believe these victims or whatever, and then he tells the joke. Now he's a sociopath who he sides with them and then makes a joke about them, that's less funny comedically than saying, oh, I side with this child molester and alleged child molester, and then now I'm going to make a joke about the victim. Like, it doesn't...
Right.
It's weird.
If I were to analyze it, which I guess you could do with jokes, but it's like, it's playing the character. And it's like, and you're right, and that makes more sense for the setup punchline and all that.
I think he maybe plays it so well that people got confused. Again, I could be wrong, but I did not assume that he actually thought Michael Jackson was innocent.
I 100% wholly believe that because it happens here. It happens here all the time where we're doing a video and I do it to myself constantly where I'm like, I'll say this thing. It's not how I feel. It's not how I agree, but I'll say it because I know it's going to set somebody else up for a joke or whatever. And then in the future with our fans, that becomes my canon. I'm like, no, I don't.
You have to lean into this sort of made up character or an extreme version of something. So like we just did something today. James found this game. It's like a baby Olympics.
Come on, baby.
It's called Come On, Baby, and it's missing a comma.
Yeah, it's missing a very vital comma.
Sounds like you're saying Come On, the Baby.
Yeah.
Which is...
I don't think it's intended.
No, I think it's a Korean game or something like that. But either way, there's a part where like Elise is like, she was asking me something like, oh, if you have kids, would you put them in a beauty pageant? And I'm like, absolutely, yes.
But you wouldn't.
No, God, no.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but personally, I know we're saying that. But I know we're going to say that. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was like,
yes,
it's funnier to lean into the Honey Boo Boo character if you're making entertainment. It's not very funny for me to sit there and go, No, I would love and respect my children, Elise. Next question.
Also, if you start every bit by being like, I'm joking, but then it completely loses its impact. I think a lot of the way that Chappelle's special was written is to be shocking. If he does that, it reduces the entire shock value of everything he's trying to say. And I get why you wouldn't be like, no, this isn't serious. You're here to stand-up comedy special. You know,
it's got people
serious.
Talking about it. I guess that's a good
I think that was the plan.
The least funny thing you can do is explain a joke. It's like the worst. But that being said, as we are kind of explaining these jokes, and we're not the funniest comedians on the planet. We are comedians, but we are not the funniest comedians by any means. Yeah. Like a good example is sometimes you say something that's so out of left field or so wrong to that character that you are portraying that's what makes it funny. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the most recent example I can think of is What's a Good Name for a Girl Homemaker?
Sure.
It makes Adam laugh.
It's a great joke.
But it doesn't, like, number one, I'm sorry for explaining it, but it doesn't make any sense. Number one, I was tipsy. Number two, doesn't make any sense. What is that? It doesn't even, why would you name that? It's not a pun. It's not anything.
Right.
3, it's overtly sexist, which I am not, and none of us are, I hope. So throwing it out there is like, that is just so completely off base.
Right.
Without even thinking, like, it's more of a commentary on how stupid you have to be to suggest that as an option, that's what makes it funny. And I know that's what Adam's laughing at.
So that's another thing too. So like Jess and I always, like, we laugh a lot at misogynistic humor.
Jess is Adam's wife.
Jess is my wife.
Adam is Jess's
Yeah, Adam is just
Jess could be my husband. She is almost the breadwinner of our life. But that's sort of like an unspoken thing that, like, her and I have had for years, where we, like, the stuff that happens on Mad Men, we're just like, oh Jesus, like, really, like, wow. But it's funny because it seems so extreme to us that it doesn't feel realistic. But then you forget about that it's like, yeah, when you're making a joke like this, there is a victim, or there are been victims and stuff like that. But it's this weird thing where you're just so far removed that it's just the idea of it so funny to you, because you're like, this is so like, so the molestation thing is like, that made me laugh. But in reality, molesting people is terrible, especially molesting children. It's a horrific thing. Yeah. That's not funny.
And finding it funny doesn't mean you support it, or that you don't sympathize with actual victims. I think it's that it's shocking.
Yeah, and also humor can come out in so many different ways. So, like, good example, John Wick 3 to me was almost a comedy. I was laughing my way through that movie because the violence is so extreme.
Yeah, it's cartoonish.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a big reason why we like Looney Tunes and stuff like that, where you see two guys breaking windows and throwing knives at each other. It's funny. It's so absurd that you laugh at it, but it's a different. It's I guess it's, there's haha funny and a different kind of funny, but, like, I don't know, there's other ways of laughing at things. So
comedy depends on a lot of things, and it's influenced by a lot of things, but being able to flip expectations and then also being able to take two things that don't make sense together and don't belong and putting those things together, I think is vital to making really good comedy. Like, you need to lure your viewer or your listener into a false sense of security with where they think your joke is going, and then do like a 180. And I don't think Dave Chappelle does that in this stand-up special. I think that's my biggest problem with it. I don't have an issue with, getting into the whole thing of, like, what is PC and what is not is a big bag of worms. Oh, sure. I think that some of the jokes that he made in the special just aren't that funny. And there's stuff that he's made in other specials. The Bill Cosby, He Rapes and He Saves, is super funny. It's wildly inappropriate, but it is very, very funny because he defies my expectation of where that bit is going, what that joke is going to do.
Well, he also gets you to buy into a concept, right? Not necessarily, but in that he tries to get you to buy into a concept that makes sense and then applies that concept to something that's bad, but you've already agreed to it. So now you look like the asshole, which is, I think, why that one pays off so well. Also, by stringing it out over the course of really. Oh, yeah. The Michael Jackson bit is just a bit at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this particular Chappelle special, he does punch down a lot. And I think, like, that's not something that I've seen him do repeatedly before. And I think that, like, there's a tweet here saying it was grim, unfunny, and lazy. And it was like, I didn't think that it was that bad, but I wasn't laughing as much as I have with his other specials because it is... I don't know. It does feel a little bit different. I feel almost like he's he tells more stories or gives more of his opinion than he does focus on telling jokes, but that's just the way I read it.
It's really hard to kind of give a pass to a rich comedian who's, he's older, he's got so much success. It's hard to, like you said, he's definitely punching down in it, and it doesn't feel like Dave Chappelle. I think he's one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like Dave Chappelle is hungry or has a fire under him anymore. He's not like some young, scrappy comedian that's trying to like really dig out this comedy, which, I don't know what you can do at that point when you're rich. Like, you can't become the guy that's living in his apartment and he's hanging out with his buds on the weekend.
I mean, do you think that he still wants to be making these specials, or is he doing it because Netflix is paying him millions of dollars? Because he quit for 10, 15 years.
I can't imagine. I feel like it's a high, like getting up on that stage and him doing that. Yeah. It's like in his lifeblood now.
I mean, Dave Chappelle is my favorite comedian of all time, and Killing Him Softly is my favorite stand-up comedy special of all time. And I agree with Elise. I think this is probably his least funny stand-up comedy special, even those other 2 Netflix ones that came out last year or 2 years ago. I would never say that he's only doing it because he got offered a lot of money. I think he loves to make people laugh. I think that's kind of at the heart of what I know that's how I feel about it, and I know that's what a lot of comedians feel, is that they like entertaining people. They like making people laugh, and they desperately want to do it. And sometimes you get yourself in trouble because you don't want to be the target of something. Patton Oswalt's done a really good job talking about it, where he was a bully as a kid because he didn't want to be the chubby one who was getting picked on. So he would use comedy to get the bullies on his side, but then that resulted in him picking on a bunch of people. So he was basically punching down his entire youth to make sure that he was not the one who
punched down upon.
I don't know that that's what Dave Chappelle is doing, but I think when you are one of the most successful stand-up comedians of all time, and you were so successful that you were like, I'm just going to disappear for 10 years. And then when you come back, someone offers you massive amounts of money to continue doing it again. Like, I don't know what punching up is for someone like that. Like, it's just, all it is what? Trump jokes? Like, world leaders are the only people above.
He left the Chappelle show because he felt like what he was putting out there into the universe wasn't valid, and it was making bad statements about race and social relations and stuff. And Mel Brooks is really interesting to me because he's been pretty vocal recently about the direction of comedy, especially like in the Me Too era and the cancellation era, and increasingly PC tides. Because he made Blazing Saddles, and it was pretty controversial. I think you couldn't make that movie today.
Yeah.
But Mel Brooks, I think, is a little bit dismayed by kind of how things are now, and I kind of agree with him. Where I'm like, you need to be able to let comedians take chances, take risks, cross the line, because that's what comedy is kind of like teetering on that line and knowing, but I mean, you can cross it, that's for sure.
Do you think it just ebbs and flows? It's just like, we were talking before this podcast, we were talking about like how comedians used to get arrested and, things were tough. Like,
then, I will get into that.
Yeah. But then then it gets to a point where anything went, like George Carlin. Like that time where it's like, oh my God, you can just do.
There's been this like trajectory coming back,
and then it comes back where you go, okay, well maybe we tone it down. So then maybe 10 years from now, it's going to go, all right, gloves off again, and maybe that's just human culture.
I definitely think there's a rubber banding. I think stuff like social media, like you reading that line without any context, is what most people see and what most people get and what most people react to. I think more people have probably read that line than have seen the comedy special in its full context. And even that, I don't think it was that funny of a joke. Adam Carolla has a bit that he does where he's like, it shouldn't count as statutory rape if one of the people high fives afterwards. Like
Louis C.K. did it too. And I think like that's part of the criticism that's coming out about stand-up comedians right now, is that they all seem to be going after the same shit. Like when you read a lot of the high-profile stand-up, the description of their stand-up, it's going to be goes after Me Too, goes after social justice, goes after social media, and I think that they're getting shit not because what they're doing is offensive, but because it feels like they're all talking about the same thing.
Oh, retreading.
And we're like, talk about something else.
Yeah, we went to a comedy club shortly after the Me Too stuff was happening, and there was a female comic who went up, I forgot who it was.
Of course she did.
It was like, I think it was like her first time or whatever.
Could you just call her a
of
comic,
course
Adam?
you think that. She's been doing it for 15 years.
Either way, the setup though was great because she said, I'm really upset with this whole Me Too stuff because I've never been sexually assaulted. So I want to start a thing called Why Not Me Too? And like, she's like, come on, boys, come get it. I was like, okay, that was a funny way of spinning it. But then like, I think you're right. There's only so much you can do with that.
And I mean, if you get up on stage and you're making fun of Harvey Weinstein, I think that's one thing because you're punching up at like this elitist shit.
I think they're all doing the opposite. And like, I think one of Chappelle's bits, which I did find really funny, but it's still punching down, is talking about how Louis C.K. was like masturbating to people on the phone. And he's like, you could just hang up the phone. And you're like, he's absolutely right. That whole bit is basically just making fun of victims who are like, oh no, he masturbated and you can't leave the room. Like, but you're still punching down the whole time.
Yeah. And there is like, it may seem like on paper it's like it's just a dude jerking off. He's the sad one. But like, no, that dude's trying to like create a manipulative power dynamic between him and these women.
Yeah, and I imagine Chappelle knows that too.
I think he does.
Yeah.
But it's funny
just
though.
Making fun of it, but like everyone else is like, well, yeah, but he's wrong. But still.
Not to speak for all stand-up comedy.
Please, all women go, oh.
I was saying all stand-up comedians, but I think a lot of the big ones who like the Bill Burrs, the Dave Chappelles, Adam Carolla's, like a lot of them have been making these jokes for a long time. And they've been kind of making a name for themselves by getting as close to the edge as possible and then kind of coming back and revealing, well, that's just things I say to get a rise out, to get a laugh out of everything. I don't actually feel that way. I don't actually think that way. The only problem is I think the climate has changed considerably because people are now influencers. I think there are also like things on Twitter that say top 5. So you could like, whether or not you're thinking about it, Dave Chappelle may not think to tell a story about this time when he was a kid in D.C. growing up, when he opens up his computer and it talks about, Me Too or whatever. Like, it's just like what you're exposed to. Everyone's now all exposed to the same thing because of aggregate news. And then I also think stuff like Louis C.K. fucked it because his whole thing was, hey, I'm just a schlub. And I just make these jokes and I'm actually the sad sack of shit, but then when it turns out, well, in you being a sad sack of shit, you also created a power dynamic and hurt a lot of people along the way. I guess that means stand-up comedians aren't necessarily just people making jokes that can then have their own personal perspectives and not be a character. Like the Louis C.K. character doesn't mesh as well now with real him because real him seems like a dirtbag.
Right.
True.
And once that starts happening, then it's like does Dave Chappelle actually feel that way? Like, even if you notice in this special, he prefaces almost every new topic he goes into with like, well, I have an Asian wife, and then does jokes, or like I actually I have amazing gay friends, like a ton of gay friends, and then goes into the joke, like which are things you probably shouldn't have to feel like you need to do, but I think because a lot of comedians feel like they're on the defensive are doing it.
Well, it's also like it's the I have a black friend defense, which never flies.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not
like,
racist because then you have a picture.
Well, I definitely feel like a lot of their comedy has changed. Like I feel like Ricky Gervais, who I also love, has been doing this a lot where some of them will start their stand-up by talking about how shitty the internet is, and I feel like they're probably taking it a little bit more personally than we would think. Like, a Twitter mob criticizes you, and I didn't see that much about Chappelle that seemed like cancel culture. It was mostly just people, like, there's a tweet that I wrote down here that said, I'm not offended, I'm not mad he's not being politically correct. I'm just disappointed that someone so intelligent and gifted insists on punching down. I don't get it. That's most of what I saw, was criticism that was like, I'm disappointed, and the way I read this stand-up is not that it's bad, it's just that Chappelle is so good that when you compare this to his other stuff, you're like, oh, it's not the same.
That's where I'm at, where I'm like, I obviously work for this channel. I like edgy humor. Surrounded by edgelords all day.
But cut if you get too close.
But compared to something like the Cosby Rapes and Saves, I just didn't think it was like, especially with stand-up, you have all this time to plan out your set, plan out your material, and you're making a special. It better be like really, really good, because I think about us, and we talk about this a lot, where like we pump out just hours and hours of content every single day. And there's stuff that I've said that crosses a line that I definitely regret saying. There's stuff that I've said that crosses a line that I'm like, that crossed the line, but I think I executed it in an artful way to give myself too much credit. Right. But at the end of the day, we're trying to just pump out so much material that we're grasping for anything, and we can't do it in the most eloquent way of planning and pre-planning. So stuff's going to slip out. Like, for me, something that we do is like, I think we always use sex and sex humor as like a fallback. But to me, I never find that. Sometimes it's like it's clever, but I never find it to be like the humor that I'm most proud of, because I think that like making jokes about fuzzy taints it's kind of
that one Harry Potter video
easy.
where you guys would just
was it names? Just names, yeah. And that I that straddles the line for me. Like Harry straddles.
Fantastic breasts.
But yeah, so for me it's like this weird thing where I'm sometimes more proud of other stuff because it feels like
it's harder.
It's harder.
Yeah, and I feel that way about the Chappelle thing a little bit. Like, it's like what he was doing to a lot of people seemed like it was easy. But again, I was going to say, a lot of the reviews mentioned him punching down or using shock value for attention. People don't seem outright offended, but obviously he's still seeing a lot of people talk about it in a negative way that he's probably not used to, because when he started doing stand-up, social media didn't exist. He didn't have all these random critics who you're like, you've never done stand-up. What do you fucking know? Like, who are you to tell me? And I feel like seeing some of these comedians take it to heart and take a step back, like Ricky Gervais did a special where he literally reads tweets and then responds to them. And it's like, that can still be really funny, but I feel like it is sort of an era where they're getting agitated with what people are saying to them and then are being defensive from the get-go, and that's changing how stand-up is being performed right now.
It's a thing that I've seen. I think it's a reason why it makes YouTube look kind of samey when you see people doing thumbnails with giant circles, and then like people are like, what up, guys? It's because everyone's copying each other.
What's up, everyone?
Yeah, it's always that because you're getting feedback immediately, whereas the way it was 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't so much like that. You would work on something, you put it out, and then you sort of, I guess the sales would dictate whether it did well or not, or you'd get a critical review, and so you would only look at, essentially 10 tweets as opposed to hundreds of thousands or even thousands. So it's like just a couple hundred is enough to make someone go insane.
Yeah.
It's what, 9 positives to undo 1 negative or something like that. And even that, it's like, I think it does something to the human psyche.
Oh yeah, none of our brains are built to get that level of feedback, I think, and it's so new.
Well, also, I mean, there's a whole reward structure to it too. I mean, Dave Chappelle is probably feels he's making the same jokes that he made that got him super rich and super successful and considered one of the greatest, right? One of the legends. But the rug moves beneath you. That's something I've realized too. It's like I feel like when we started, like it was a different climate then, and I hate to bring politics into it, but like it was a pre-Trump. It seemed like things were going in a different direction, and now maybe things are a little bit more divided, and so you're more likely to land in a category that you don't necessarily want to be in, or that people's perspectives are more sensitive. I think justifiably, just because that's how divisiveness can be. But a good example for me is like the Asian accent that I do. When we started doing it, I was trying to do a Ken. I found out like in high school after watching Last Samurai, I could do a pretty good Ken Watanabe, right?
Oh, that's not Ken Watanabe.
Well, and it also morphs into a Hattori Hanzo.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We're thinking it was Hattori Hanzo,
which in and of itself is not a Japanese accent. It's a theatrical, over the top. Like it's even played that way in the Kill Bill movie and in all the stuff. But so like it's like, oh, I can do a pretty good one. That's good. But more recently, it's been referred to, people have enjoyed it. That's fine. But it's been referred to as James's offensive Asian accent. That's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I can either keep doing it or I can find something else. And that's just an example of the rug having moved out from under me. And when I set out to do it, I wasn't trying to mock anyone. I did a good impression of a character. And now it's not that, and it's not being, even if people enjoy it and don't necessarily find it offensive, I don't like that idea of things, and the climate changed. And so I will try and find some other thing.
Some other race to offend.
I do a really good Idi Amin.
With most things in life, it's sort of crazy. The Simpsons has an episode about this, where Krusty finds himself no longer relevant in the world of 90s stand-up comics. And he gets not offended, but he's shocked when Janine Garofalo goes, so today I got my period, and he spits his drink out like, oh my God. But then he goes up and he's just failing miserably. He goes, well, time to bring out the A material. And he puts in buck teeth and does the me so sorry. And everyone's like, oh my God. Like, which it was sort of a weird, like, that's way more offensive.
Yeah.
Well, for me, my barometer was Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's, a beloved classic Hollywood film starring Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
I was like, well, as long as you don't go there.
It is funny when you see 21-year-old girls with Audrey Hepburn posters, Breakfast activities in their apartment, but then it's like, but then you think of the other side of that movie.
21-year-old me with a Mickey Rooney poster.
Yeah.
God.
At least
But I don't know. It's just things change. We are on a people mover.
Mm-hmm.
We spent some time at amusement parks,
so
we will relate everything to theme parks.
It's for sure part of a comedian's job to stay funny with the times as they change, I think. And I don't know if it's just my perspective, but whenever I see people say, oh, people these days are too sensitive, I'm always just like, they're sensitive in different ways. But remember, they wanted to cancel books and they wanted to get rid of heavy metal music and video games. Like, people have always been sensitive about different shit. And we will get into the stand-up comedian who was literally put in jail for saying offensive things forever ago. It's always been a thing. I think it's just we see more of it now because everyone's opinion has more weight because of social media. So you're just exposed to a lot more of it. It's not that people weren't sensitive 50 years ago.
Does it mean your opinion has more weight if there's more of it, or it's just...
So more people can see it, thus it has more value, I think.
Does it have value, though, if everyone's got one? I'm just trying I'm thinking of the rules of economics.
Basically, just more people can see it than they could before. So
there's more visibility, but I don't know why my opinion would be worth more than James's or anything, because there's a verification check mark next to it.
I don't mean based on how many followers we have. I just mean that the average human who would never have been seen, who even has 2 followers, can still use a hashtag and go viral.
Sure.
Which just means everyone has more weight than they used to.
I feel like it swings both ways, though, because when everyone's got an opinion, you end up, I think you just, either you go one way or the other. Either you get sensitive to everyone's wants and needs, or you just start to ignore everybody because it's just noise.
Yeah, I guess it's a little ephemeral. It's like both, because like someone will tweet something and then it explodes, then it's forgotten the next day. Whereas, Winston Churchill would say something and it would get quoted in every newspaper.
Well, take to the streets on the seas. Oh, is that
well, Churchill? I watched a whole video about how Gary Oldman nailed that accent because the way he talks.
We get the same recommended video.
Anyway, you see something, it would get published in like everything, and then it would just be never forgotten. But now things like, a billion people see it, but then it's kind of like
everyone's sort of just looking for the next controversy. I think everyone wants you want a quick headline, you want a quick story, you want to move on to the next one, whether you know that or not. I think
that applies to the comedians too. Like, I feel like they're going after these controversial topics because they want it to spread. Netflix didn't stop advertising Sticks and Stones. Still made a ton of money and got a lot of views.
Oh, sure.
So it's not like any of the controversy mattered. It actually worked in their favor.
I mean, look, all the cancellations from Netflix are going to be happening in November anyway, so they got time. They need reasons. But I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, for me, when I saw you sent the doc and you're like, hey, this is what we're talking about today, even my brain instinctively went, really? We're talking about this? And that happened like 3 weeks ago? But
it's just a lot right now.
No. I'm just saying it's crazy how my own brain's working
that quickly.
Yeah, where I'm already like, aren't we on something new today? Didn't something happen? I don't know. But it's
George Lucas is pissed about Star Wars.
Is he pissed? Oh no, George. He's so
really?
rich.
I need to do an ad read.
Okay, go for it.
Hims is a wellness brand offering solutions for some of the things that might have men feeling insecure. Funhaus's own Lawrence Sontag used Hims when he noticed his hairline creeping back a little and says he found great results with a damn good head of hair to prove it. And hey, summertime is going away, so you won't be able to break out that baseball cap to hide your thinning hair much longer. But actually, with the way some of Hims products work, you might be able to prevent your hair from thinning entirely if you'd like to. Don't sweat the hair loss. Do something now while you still can. 66% of men lose their hair by the age 35, so why do nothing when you can turn to science? 4hims.com is a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. Thanks to science, baldness can be optional. Hims connects you to real doctors and medical-grade solutions to treat hair loss and help you keep your hair with no snake oil or pills or silly tricks, only prescription solutions backed by science. So, order now. Our listeners get a trial month of Hims for just $5 today while supplies last. See the website for full details and safety information, and remember, this would cost you hundreds if you went to a pharmacy. So, instead, go to 4hims.com/dude. That's 4hims.com/dude. Thank you to Hims for sponsoring this episode. To get back to the conversation, so another facet of this was the Shane Gillis thing that happened, I think, last week. Basically, Shane Gillis.
SNL guy.
Yeah, kind of unfolded over the course of last week.
This is via NPR. Shane Gillis, a comedian who has been under fire over the past few days for using racist and homophobic slurs on his podcast, has been fired from Saturday Night Live. The video that got him into hot water was an excerpt from Matt and Shane's secret podcast,
Not so secret.
Apparently.
It's getting you fired from SNL.
Secrets out.
He used a racial slur and made fun of Chinese accents during a discussion about Chinatown. In another episode, he uses gay slurs to describe comedians he doesn't think are funny. An SNL spokesperson said, "We want SNL to have a variety of voices and points of view within the show. The language he used is offensive, hurtful, and unacceptable. We are sorry that we did not see the clips earlier and that our vetting process was not up to our standard." Gillis's response was, "It feels ridiculous for comedians to be making serious public statements, but here we are," which is a dumb sentence, but... he goes on to say, "I'm a comedian who is funny enough to get on SNL. That can't be taken away, of course. I wanted an opportunity to prove myself at SNL, but it would be too much of a distraction. I respect the decision they made. I'm honestly grateful for the opportunity." And his cancellation, I believe, was announced the same day that SNL hired its first ever full-time cast member of East Asian descent.
Yeah.
Which I feel is an important...
Oh, yes.
They were all, there's like 3 people that were hired, and one was like, "Hey, here's a great headline. We're actually hiring an Asian cast member." Mm-hmm. Oh, this other one said some really terrible things.
Who thinks he's also an Asian cast member.
Who said some really terrible things about Asians, So that's, I think, also what helped him.
I wonder if maybe they hadn't been hiring an Asian cast member, if maybe it would have been controversial and he would have apologized, but he wouldn't have lost his spot on the show.
I don't know.
Possibly. Especially because SNL is historically very white. I feel like for them to do that...
Name 360 people who have been on the show who was white.
SNL is very...
Jim Belushi.
It's very interesting in what SNL chooses to be upset about. Like the whole Jenny Slate thing when she got blackballed because she said fuck on live air by accident.
Oh.
Jenny Slate seems like the nicest, sweetest person. She's super funny. And
wait, so she cursed on a show that airs at
11
1 a.m.?
Yeah, she said, it slipped out, she said fuck. She basically got blacklisted in the rest of the season, and then she was removed. Dated Captain America after,
it
so things worked okay
It worked out for Jenny Slate.
Right.
She's in Zootopia.
But if you told me today, that just seems ridiculous. It seemed ridiculous to me. It seemed like
I guess that brings up the bigger the what's his name, Shane Gillis?
Yeah.
That thing of it's sort of like start scrubbing your past now if you ever plan to
terrifying.
If you ever plan to do anything with your life.
I don't.
I'm good.
I think so our situation, we're now owned by AT&T and Warner Brothers and this big company, and we're hoping it'd be cool to do bigger projects and stuff inside of this big company. What if they see James's offensive Ken Watanabe accent that everyone's offended by still to this day, and they go, "You're hired."
Well, there is something about the fact of what we do, and again, this guy's podcast, where it exists forever. It is now forever.
Yeah.
Just because
social media has removed the context of time.
Yeah, just because you made it 4 years ago doesn't mean that it isn't now for somebody. Mm-hmm. I like to hope that it's context. I know context doesn't really matter, but I like to think that context comes into play in those types of things. Mm-hmm. I never listened. I read the transcript, like we talked about, is not the best way to do it for the Shane Gillis podcast, and because there were a couple incidents, and it felt more ranty than it did feel like a bit necessarily.
Right. That's the vibe I get from that too. Is it didn't feel like he was joking. He was being offensive in a rant intentionally to make it funny, but it didn't feel like a bit.
Which is that happens sometimes. You swing for a home run.
Kramer's a good example of that.
Oh yeah, Michael Richards. You mean?
Yeah. So I only know him as Kramer. But Michael Richards stand-up,
blowout,
which is he just, I don't know if you know, but he went up and did it. He was doing stand-ups. He didn't know he was being recorded, and he did something sounds similar where he went on this rant and did a thing.
There were 2 hecklers.
He was being heckled, yeah.
Okay.
But then he got very upset with the hecklers who happened to be African American, and then started using slurs really bad. But it was one, he seemed genuinely pissed off that his stand-up set was being heckled, which is pretty unprofessional. But then 2, it seemed like he tried to recover it by how wild can I get? But he didn't. It wasn't funny, and it wasn't wild enough to be considered funny, and it just sounded like an angry man using slurs.
That's not great.
There's a weird fight or flight thing. You see it a lot of times in cringe videos or whatever. The only one I can think of is the Rooster Teeth kid who deep-throated a mic one time, where it's all eyes are on you. You're better do something cool. And I don't know, people do dumb things all the time. It's hard to stay cool under pressure. And, not to excuse that sort of behavior, but I think that's the sort of thing that does happen.
I think they're still trying to be funny.
Yeah.
But they're doing a very bad job of it.
It's tough when you miss the mark so hard and then you're just doubling down because you're like, I need to recover somehow. But sometimes you can't recover from that. It's just sometimes you go, well, I think Conan O'Brien's he does it the best.
Oh.
Because is open. If you ever watch his monologue, he'll do jokes that just bomb completely. And he builds off of it, and he always recovers.
But Conan also has exquisitely self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
Because Conan, he punches down all the time. His staff members, he's constantly belittling and all his what are they called? Like his offsite bits and stuff he does, or his I forget what they call them. They have a specific name, but like everything he does where he's going around his office, he's constantly saying stuff to his staff members, but they all laugh. Because then he turns around and he points the finger back at himself and he goes, well, who am I? I'm just your withered old lonely boss. And he's one of my favorite comedians of all time.
I think you can get away with punching down if you punch down on yourself a lot too.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
The Shane Gillis stuff, it did seem to me like he was angry, but I also pretty strongly feel like companies shouldn't listen to social media outrage when making hiring decisions. Like, if I'm not going to support it with the James Gunn incident, I feel like I shouldn't support it with the Shane Gillis incident, but I'm not confident in saying that because I didn't listen to it.
There's weird stuff where I saw other people making points where they said by firing him now, not necessarily even not that he wants the platform for it, though it has already raised his profile infinitely more than if he was just a new cast member. I don't know the other two's names. I think Bowen is one of them.
Yeah.
But and Claire maybe only because she does good impressions. Careful with those. But it's raised his profile. But other people have said, well, by doing this, you've given a platform to those people that feel like they can't say, like that genuinely want to say offensive things and be offensive, and then coax it, like cover it later by saying it's comedy. But if he had just been brought on and then been any other first-year cast member that basically gets zero play, and so much of that world is how you can ingratiate yourself with the writing staff and the other cast members and then appear on camera and really show up and stuff and like make a name for yourself. It's basically like freshman year at college. But no one will want to touch that, and then he would just fade into obscurity.
Yeah.
Then it just disappears. But because social media pressure seems so vast and seems so large, you have to react to it immediately. Whereas probably the better solution would be to just let it unfold and then let it disappear.
Yeah.
But then who knows? Maybe something else would have happened.
To Shane, if you're gonna be offensive, it better be funny. It better be really, really good jokes.
Yeah.
We recorded that Pirates gameplay that's coming out in a couple weeks. And
what did we do this time?
We made a lot of Amber Heard cell phone jokes when we recorded it. We did. None of those are in the edit because they were offensive jokes, but they weren't funny enough to make the edit. I mean, I thought they were funny too. Okay.
We realized that our standard is way lower than what the standard should be.
But you know what? They should have been better jokes.
I know. And so I guess it's weird because when you talk about that joke, my mind doesn't go, oh my God, that poor woman got a phone thrown at her. I think of two rich people throwing expensive, bedazzled iPhones. And that to me is funny because I'm like, that's punching up, where I'm like, oh, that's funny. It's rich people being crazy and rich. Like that's hilarious to me. But then when people go, well, hold on, you didn't think about the battered wife thing. I'm like, no, I didn't. And I guess that's just not how my brain's working. So yeah, I don't know. My sense of humor's on, I guess, a lower level, like you said.
I mean,
monkey.
I hope people understand that in this office we're relatively progressive, and we want everyone to feel like they can be included and in on the joke, and no one is excluded from any content that we ever make. But I think a big part of it is no matter what you do, if you're going to be defensive, you probably won't get anywhere. Like, the person you are today or were 4 years ago doesn't have to be the person you're going to be tomorrow. And part of that is learning and hearing so if you say something, you're like, that was fucking funny. That was so funny. And then someone sends you a message and goes, this is why this wasn't funny to me. You should listen. Like, you should genuinely listen, because I think that will make you a better comedian. Not necessarily that you're going to avoid that next time, but you can at least understand a personal perspective on what that means to someone. And the more you know about what certain things mean to people, the more you can tap into well, what would have made that funny? And then now it's funnier to more people.
It's also
and
just
it's
harder.
Like,
Being inclusive and funny is
yeah.
more difficult.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I respect it more because it's harder.
You're like Piccolo wearing weighted clothing.
Exactly. Just like Piccolo wearing weighted clothing.
So you're saying we shouldn't...
So that's why I would rather be Piccolo, is what I'm saying.
We shouldn't judge people based on their worst decisions.
Well,
what you're saying.
Unless their worst decision was today.
I just wanted to
and
quote,
then they're shouting at you and saying it's your fault.
Or
and
it was like Stalin
blame.
levels of bad.
I just wanted to quote Black Widow from was Infinity War or
Endgame. Cool. Yeah.
Nice current reference for us. Thanks, Adam.
It was on the plane on the ride home.
Somewhere out there is a pillow that is stitched with a quote of mine that said, "What Hitler did wasn't funny because his timing was off." So I don't know who that makes look worse, me or Hitler.
Yeah.
But someone came to me and they said, "This is why I didn't think that was funny." I would listen. And I would want to have a conversation about that.
I think also, on the topic of Hitler, the Jojo Rabbit trailer, where it's like,
you should always make fun of Mel Brooks said himself, you should always make fun of Hitler.
Yeah, it kind of takes the power away from, I guess, I don't know, but I think even some people are like, not cool, dude. Making fun of Hitler, not cool. It's like, what?
Well, but I think it's like...
Is it because you're laughing about the Holocaust or whatever?
I don't think it's making fun of Hitler as much as it's mocking a historical event which impacted millions of lives.
There's a documentary we watched about like humor in the Holocaust. And maybe I just watched it, but like, because a lot of like Jewish comedians, like they, have for the last 50 years made a lot of like Holocaust jokes, humor, and there are people that survived the Holocaust that do not like those jokes, and it's your own way of like, but for a lot of the people that lived in concentration camps, that was their way of dealing with it, right? It was making jokes, and that's how they survived. So it's like it's all personal perspective and having empathy and being able to say like, well, maybe that's not funny to me, but I don't think that you mean it in a harmful way. Like, I don't think Mel Brooks making jokes about Hitler, he means that in a harmful way to people that survived the Holocaust. I think he has like the utmost empathy and sympathy for those people, but he is trying to punch up, or he was trying to punch up,
Also, there's a world where things can be funny to you that you don't have to assume is going to be funny to everyone, and the people that don't find it funny just are wrong about that. Like, there's stuff we've thought is funny, and we're like you said, we think it could be funny, but that doesn't mean we want to assume everyone else's barometer for comedy is the same way. So
it's
why
a lot
put
of
it out there?
awareness. That's also part of the job.
Yeah.
I need to do another ad read.
Yep.
9 times out of 10, shopping online beats going to the store. It's easy to find everything you want, you don't have to wait in any lines, and it saves time for you to do some other stuff you really want to during your day. But 9 times out of 10, you're overpaying when you shop online, unless you use Honey. For those of you who don't know, Honey is a free browser extension that saves you money everywhere you shop online. It finds coupon codes and other discounts across the web and applies them for you automatically, meaning you're not overpaying anymore. I'll be honest, I don't know exactly how it works. I just know it saves me money everywhere I shop, so it might actually be magic. And the average Honey user saves about $126 per year. That's several weeks worth of groceries or a nice new dress or some new shoes or some AirPods, all thanks to Honey's savings. Over 100 million people are already saving with Honey, and the company has over 100,000 5-star reviews on the Google Chrome store. Time magazine calls Honey basically free money, which is all I've ever really wanted. So there's really no reason not to use Honey. It's free to use, installs on your computer in just 2 clicks, and it'll save you money so you can treat yourself to something nice. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/dude. That's joinhoney.com/dude. Thank you to Honey for sponsoring this week's episode of Dude Soup. So there's another thing that I wanted to talk about, in this whole thing where I feel like we've established that comedy is subjective and it's smarter if you don't punch down or whatever, but I don't feel like the cancel culture thing is as prevalent as people are suggesting. Like, I feel like there are suggestions that people are trying to cancel Dave Chappelle, whereas the perspective I get, and I could be getting the wrong read, was more that people were just criticizing him for not being as funny as normal or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't think cancel was the intent.
No.
He does preface, like I said about him prefacing everything, he opens that set by going like, he's like, I hate all of you because you're gonna want to cancel culture. He like literally does.
Yeah, it was
that
like
thing
in
at the
10
top
years you're gonna
you're gonna hate this or whatever.
And even Louis C.K. I mean, he technically got canceled, but is still doing stand up. So
I was gonna say that it's like, can you truly cancel something if there's an audience for it? Because you could. He lost his show and he lost a bunch of these perks, I guess, or these big things. But if the guy on a bare bones level wants to start a YouTube channel or go do stand up somewhere else, like he could probably still survive. So you can't really.
Yeah, it'd be fine.
Can't. I don't think you can truly cancel people.
No, and it again doesn't seem like people are necessarily trying to when they criticize comedy all of the time. I'm sure there are some people who are, but that's not the read that I get. I just feel like we're all kind of reacting a little bit, especially when compared to what happened to stand-up comedian Lenny Bruce. I only found out about this super recently after looking into a bunch of these controversies because I was really curious about all of it. So basically, for anyone who doesn't know, because I had no idea, in 1964, stand-up comedian Lenny Bruce was indicted on violations of obscenity law, New York Penal Code 1140A. Which prohibited obscene, indecent, immoral, and impure drama, play, exhibition, and entertainment, which would tend to the corruption of morals of youth and others. There were jokes that literally threatened to land him in prison, which included a line about Jackie Kennedy trying to escape JFK's convertible after his assassination. The exact quote is, "She hauled ass to save her ass." Apparently hyper offensive at the time. He'd said... and it was also a bit that was also considered really offensive that mentioned men having sex with chickens. People were very upset about it.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So he'd already been arrested multiple times on charges and barred from entering the UK. He literally got banned from countries. After an arrest in 1961, which is prompted in part by his use of the word cocksucker during a San Francisco performance, he was represented by a First Amendment lawyer whose partner refused to take the case. He said, "You can't win a case based on cocksucker." So they wouldn't take his case because he had used that phrase, which apparently 1960 super offensive.
Yeah.
James, it sounds like you know a lot more about what happened with Lenny Bruce, but it was basically, the understanding I get is that it's someone who was like very early on in stand-up comedy who...
He's like the godfather of modern...
shock comedy.
Well, because like even before him, like it was kind of post-vaudeville. Like it was more about performance and it was very, very soft. Yeah, it was more like bits and stuff, you know.
Comedy duos and stuff.
Yeah, or like the early Dean Martin things. Very, very fun comedy. And he was like, no, I'm going to use comedy to pull back the curtain and talk about how human beings really are and say the things that we are all secretly laughing at in our private homes and stuff. But he basically did it underground, but that underground, he had tapped into something so much that like it grew, but it got attention, and then that attention meant that the society was like, no, we're not like that, except they actually were.
I think I could be wrong on this one. I think that like energized comedians like Richard Pryor and other ones, like George Carlin and stuff, where like if you look at their early stuff, like Richard Pryor's like very clean cut, very nice, and then you see the flip, and then when it's like, oh my God, he got really funny when he got real blue and real crass. Like,
well, it was so it's basically like a bunch of comedians that would go up there in a suit and tie and then say some funny gaffes about their old lady or whatever, you know. And then there was Lenny Bruce. He showed up and then he was like, "Fuck the Kennedys," you know, like basically, and like fuck the Catholic Church.
Oh yeah, he did a lot of stuff about the Catholic Church.
He
and
shit on the church.
Pedophilia too.
Yeah, and like called out church for its horrendous behaviors and stuff like that. It's in like Boston, which is very Catholic city, and got in a lot of trouble for that. But because he did that, then the George Carlins and the Richard Pryors and the Red Skeltons and
Red Fox.
Well, there's Red Skelton was another one, but
there's two Reds.
Red Skelton was clean comedy, I think.
Yeah.
Or he had the Red Skelton show.
Okay.
Yeah, you might be thinking of Red Fox.
He was more of like a vaudevillian type, like variety show.
Yeah.
But
you think like Smucker Brothers. Even
Smucker Brothers got blacklisted for a while because they started doing anti-war jokes.
Oh yeah, Steve Martin wrote for the Smucker Brothers.
Yeah. And they're very like clean cut, very like Mormon looking guys, and they're playing their guitar, and then they're like, "Hey, we did some funny anti-war stuff." And they're like, "You're blacklisted from TV for being anti-government." And they're like, "What?"
But Lenny Bruce basically went to jail, lost everything he ever earned, all the money he ever earned, and died young and alone. So that way George Carlin and Richard Pryor could go on and turn what that was into a mainstream phenomenon where it was like, no, you should be wanting to hear these types of voices in comedy. And like the problem, I think, is when people presume that just because they say something edgy or offensive, they are like Lenny Bruce, which they are not. He tapped into something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think he either set the stage for these other comedians, or he was 10 years too early. Because if he had been doing comedy like post-Vietnam War, when like it was like anti-establishment, we're not just kowtowing to the government line, I think probably what happened to him wouldn't have happened. Yeah. But if he didn't exist, who knows? Yeah. I don't know. You know?
I don't know. It's important to, I guess, it's like, I think a lot of people will find using crass humor or like, you know, edgy sort of thing as like a crutch where you're like, just F this, F that. And it's like, well, there's no joke there.
Sometimes you're making jokes all the time and you get really bored and you're like, I make jokes with my friends all the time, or in this case, like our coworkers, like, I am going to try to shock you guys. I'm stuff I don't say on camera, but I am going to try to like, you know, push the edge.
Yeah. I know we've been criticized. We've been criticized in every way, shape, and form.
Mostly you.
Mostly me. But I've seen this with people who first discover our stuff and they go, oh, a little too edgy, like little try-hard guys. Just by, and it's like, I don't think we ever use cussing just, I never want to use it as a crutch.
People tell me that I swear too much to be funny, and I'm like, I'm just Australian. It's just a part of how I speak. I don't try to do it.
I think, honestly, I wish I didn't curse as much as I do.
But I can't help it.
I think when you work in an office environment where everyone's cursing all the time, like, I didn't realize how much I did that until I went back home. I went to like a family event and every other thing was F this, shit that, blah, blah. And my mom was like, cut it down a little bit. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was doing it. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, you can tell if someone forces it, I think. But
so I think there is a way of doing crass humor without leaning into, you know, edgelordness or, you know, cursing semantics or anything like that. But I don't know. So I feel bad for anyone who tries to watch yourself because I would always hope our humor is, it's like, oh, those guys are funny because they cuss a lot. And it's like, no, like, I hope you notice the setup and the punchline instead of just, I've seen a lot of humor stuff where it's just punchlines. Or I'm just going to quote funny things that I've seen. I'm going to say, my wife, and I go, see, easy.
It's funny because it's beyond the point of being funny.
It was a story, it was like Ricky and Elliot.
Some of my favorite bits, though. Like, I love the Chappelle pussy juice joke.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can tell it's just for him, and he's just building this thing up for a really long time.
Yeah.
But it's not that funny.
No.
Yeah.
I was just saying, Ricky and Elliot were telling me the story where they went to a Kingsman thing in London, and there was a guy who kept doing a Austin Powers impersonation the whole time.
Yeah, baby.
And like, so part of me is like,
that.
I'm like, it's so bad, it's good.
Yeah.
But then I saw the footage and went, oh no,
it's
not. It's just bad.
Yeah.
But
there's an awareness.
Yes.
The guy who goes, my wife, as the actual punchline to his joke is not funny.
Yeah.
Even if you find it funny. But you using it as an example of the worst thing you could possibly say as a punchline for a joke is funny because you know it's not funny.
My brain is very warped at this point, and we did that Smosh Laugh Challenge video, and I was very, very surprised because the response was that our humor was very edgy and risque, and I was like,
we held back
didn't think that at all.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it probably is.
I guess it's your own personal goalpost.
It's a sliding scale, you know.
Maybe.
I don't think we wanted to go out there and be like, I'm going to do the worm wearing a chicken hat, and then that's going to be my version of a joke.
Yeah.
My worm wife.
Not to discount you, Adam, but I know the two of you watch a lot of stand-up. One thing that I'm curious about is... Adam, could you leave the room, please?
Leave it to the stand.
I know that
I was raised on stand-up.
Black comedians got really, really big, and there was a period of time that seems like it was ages ago where they were just blatantly making fun of white people. Was that
as they should?
Was that like a huge controversy while that was happening 20 years ago?
No, because again, it taps into a vein of society, which is the oppression of minorities in this country. And so, like, you know, one of my favorite Dave Chappelle bits is when he does his white guy voice.
So
he was like, I was out with my friend, and he goes,
sir.
Now, Dave.
Sir.
Dave. My favorite is
Kevin Hart has a good white guy voice, too.
Let's race them. They're both high. And him in his car, he pulls up next to a police officer, like, let's race him, Dave.
Was it when we did the on Chappelle show and did the wife swap thing? And he's like, I'm just gonna stick it through the hole now.
Yeah. I don't think
some of the most popular comedians in the world are black, and I'm surprised that there wasn't at some point in time some white anger about being like, how dare you make fun of us?
If there was, but they should sit down.
Be like back on Kings of Comedy type.
Louis C.K. called it out a long time ago, where he was like, we've had it too good for too long, and our day is coming. But for now, and it's like, but it's that self-awareness of like, they're like, I think you're sort of, I don't know.
Well, and white people are ridiculous. Like, come on, we deserve to be mocked.
I think,
I always find it funny, but I just feel like there has to have been an era where it was a problem.
Like you were saying about like a group that was being marginalized for a really long time. It does feel like it is punching up.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It shouldn't be. Like, I mean, I don't know. I hope that there's humor that can also be done in good jest, too. So, like, I don't know.
Like what?
I don't think, black comedians making jokes about white people. Like, whatever.
Oh,
it's good fun.
Well, I mean, if you're going to if you get defensive, nothing's ever going to be funny.
I say there's a difference between a stand-up bit and a hate rally. There's a big difference.
Yes.
Example, I remember I was a kid, we were at like Venice Beach, and there was a group of I forget what they were called, but it was predominantly it was a black group of guys, and they were doing this speech of saying like, they're like, we got to do it for Jesus and God, and there's this really like white like Southern woman being like, yes, and then at one point he goes, and we must kill the white man, and she went, oh. I remember laughing at that so much. And she was so into it, and then she's like, uh-oh, they want me dead.
She got.
Did you hear Dave shit on himself? Yeah, died crying like a bitch. That's one of my favorite
white people
voices
are really good.
There's that one movie, was it Thank You for Waiting?
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bit with that where I think it's like David Cross it's Lakeith
Stanfield?
Lakeith Stanfield, yeah. It's him, but he's doing his white person voice, but they just voice over it with David Cross.
Oh,
like, hello, sir. And it's like, they have to like, ADR it, and it's a little weird, but he like gets ahead in his life because he can perfect that voice.
Yeah.
And he's selling better than anyone else.
Yeah.
It's an interesting movie.
I mean, isn't that like half the crux of that movie?
Wait till you get to the last third.
It gets real depressing.
It gets weird.
Oh.
Because I don't know. We saw an early screening. I remember being like, I don't know what to think about this movie.
I am blanking on the name of the Italian comedian who does the gestures.
Sebastian Maniscalco.
Sebastian Maniscalco. He's great.
I saw him in your notes for it because he made that joke about the Teen Choice Awards or something.
Yeah, so he was...
he did a joke
where MTV Video Music Awards were hosted by him at 46 years old. And his opening monologue mocked millennials and teens. He said, if you feel triggered or you feel offended by anything I'm saying here or anything the musical artists are doing, they're providing a safe space backstage where you get some stress balls and a blankie, and also Lil Nas X brought his horse, which will double as an emotional support animal. Which, it's funny, but I feel like I put that in there because I feel like it also proves the point that kind of comedy right now is popular, and that's why so many comedians are doing it, is because making fun of millennials seems to be working really well for them.
Context is so important with him too. He's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
But like he does a whole bit about going over to a friend's house and they're like, "Oh, take off your shoes." He's like, "Why am I gonna take off my shoes? I don't want to see your feet." Like, but it shows how absurd and overreacting he is to this sort of thing. Like sometimes when you're like, part of your comedy is how defensive you are about a non-issue or something. Like I'm sure that's probably what he was going for in that. But when your whole audience is like, no, but you're talking about us. Like that's how we feel, and we feel very passionately about this.
We saw him like 3 or 4 years ago do stand-up, and it was a mind-blowing experience because we were right in the front row, and his whole routine is based around his body movements.
Yeah, I love that stuff though.
It's so funny because I was crying. I was laughing so hard because he's like, he'll tell a joke and then it looks like he's throwing a strike.
Yeah, well, he also has
like what
80-minute stand-up special where he only speaks for about 40 minutes of it because the rest of it is him just going, what do you do? What the?
You want me to take my shoes off in the house, walk in my socks like a child?
You want me to put my shoes over there?
I think that's part of why I like Bill Burr a lot is because he gets angry about stuff that it's absolutely absurd to get angry about, and it's just really fun
But he
to watch.
knows he's an angry white guy.
And
so it all comes from the perspective of being an angry white guy, and he's like,
and he says stuff that I go, I don't agree with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. He had a bit that I was watching not too long ago that was about how white women complain about everything and complain about harassment and mistreatment, and I think it was tied into Me Too. And he was like, but you're still in the same fucking jacuzzi as the white guy. And it's like, effectively that's making fun of me, but how angry he presents that particular thing about white women still being top of the tent pole just below white men, but then there's still every person of color below that. But he presents a very serious argument in such an aggressive way that it just becomes completely ridiculous. He's just really well done.
I think there is a certain runway that a lot of because these comedians are established legends of their field, and they will have a certain runway. But I do think, kind of like I was saying, that the climate is ever changing, and you do have to, if you want to continue doing it and doing it at the top of your field, you do have to be willing to adapt and change. And it would be stupid of us to just make Me Too jokes and expect those to be good just for now and forever. Like you should just constantly be changing. And I think that's why always adjusting your barometer and not necessarily changing who you are or what you think is funny is, but understanding what makes things funny or not funny by communicating and having a conversation with people and not getting defensive about the jokes that are told about you and the jokes that you tell is the best way. That being said, I'm an unknown comedian. No one cares about.
Yeah, I mean, look, our time is coming.
SNL's never
which
called
sucks
me.
because we're nothing.
SNL's never fired me from anything.
But like in a weird way, a lot of our humor, I don't know if people know this, but like it kind of came from punching down, but in a weird sort of way. It's like we're in a weird microcosm, basically, where we played crappy games, but our favorite ones were always people who it's like the Mystery Science Theater thing. They tried really hard. They made a game where like this character, he's a badass soldier you play, and we're just like, what a like Chaser was the one where we're just like, what a joke of a character, and it's like. Those to me are so funny, but then when someone makes a game and they're like, we're being funny, you're like, well, this is no fun. Like,
I would even say to those types of videos, it's a lot like the Conan thing though, because we are mocking the game relentlessly. This game that someone put their heart and time and hopefully got paid to make, but probably not enough. They put a lot of time and effort into it, and now we're going to just ripping it to shreds. But I do think that we look for opportunities in those types of videos and basically all of our videos to mock ourselves within it. Like, well, why are we here playing this game?
Oh, or something like,
why are we doing it? We're the worst.
I feel like that's
of
what the
this.
Funhaus brand of humor is.
Say for example, like you go, like look at that main character, look at his crotch, like he clearly has a small penis, and then you would turn to Bruce and go, what do you know? How do you know what a small penis looks like? And he'd go,
It's
you just wrote a Funhaus
I just wrote a Funhaus joke.
Which apparently we script our jokes according to some people. I was very confused.
But
it's all improv.
I think it's and it isn't an immunity thing. I'm not saying that we should be immune from criticism because that's our goal, but I do think that's the difference. Sometimes when you can point out your goal of it or your goal is obvious, then maybe it won't come off as.
We also have the benefit of being edited. Like there's tons of shit that's probably not funny that gets edited out of an hour-long video. Like they don't have that in a stand-up special.
I mean, technically, the stand-up special should be an edited down of all the stuff. So, like when I was talking about the comedy night I went to, Whitney Cummings was there, and she was in pajamas and a clipboard, and she's like, let's try this one. Tried it, didn't get much laugh. Like, okay, that one's not very funny. Then the one got a laugh. She goes, okay. It's like she's getting paid to use the audience as a barometer, and then she's building up for the big special where she's like, I'm just going to do the A material. So they do kind of have that.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
go to a stand-up night and see the bad stuff, like the stuff that like there'll be a guy who goes up there.
Purpose, I guess.
What's that?
They're testing it on you on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. There's a guy who went up. He did a pedophile joke, and you just hear, and he's like, "Okay, I'll see you next time." And I was like, it just didn't land. Like, sorry, dude.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I think it's also weird too, like, because Dave Chappelle. We get this too. If we did a live show in LA, and we tweeted it out to Funhaus fans, and they came, they bought tickets, and they came, and then we said anything. They're already kind of they're bought in. So Dave Chappelle, to do that editing, has to find a place where they're not already going to leap at the opportunity to see Dave Chappelle live and laugh at all the things he said. Even in that Sticks and Stones special, there's this one dude you can see every time they kind of shoot over his left shoulder. There's this guy who's dying at everything.
That's how I felt about doing the kind of funny thing at RTX was like, well, you know who I am. You're going to laugh at anything that I say.
For us,
if I tried
great.
that somewhere, and you're comfortable, I wasn't worried at all. I was like, they're happy to be here. It's always going to be fine. But if I went and did that somewhere else, it would probably be a completely
I think about that. Every time that we've done it, I'm like, this is a built-in audience.
Yeah.
They've come here to laugh.
You're doing a stand-up simulator.
At you specifically. They're excited to see you walk on stage. Like, it's just
It feels good, but you will only truly find out if those jokes are good if someone who doesn't know or care about you laughs.
True.
And says, I was actually really happy Troy Baker was there for my most recent stand-up, and I heard him laughing at a joke I made about my being kidnapped as a child.
I just try to make Jeff laugh.
Jeff laughs at everything though.
No.
Sometimes.
Doesn't. Trust me, he doesn't.
But it's like finding those types of things. But you have for all those stand-up we did and stuff, like there's no way to know if anything we said was actually funny unless we go to Flappers in Burbank and try it on a Tuesday night.
Could be completely different.
With a drunk audience that didn't get much sleep that night and their wife left them and they're drinking their sorrows away and they're like, make me laugh, clown. And then you go, well, I got my period, and you go, boo!
Or even worse than that, they're sitting there with their 2 minutes of jokes that they are just desperately trying to memorize, to think about, to wait to hear their name called to see if they're actually going to get up and go tonight. That's what's on their mind. True. And now you have to make that person laugh. Like, that's why it's so terrible.
I just always think of D doing stand-up on It's Always Sunny.
Howdy.
Yeah.
It's so good. That guy... I resonate with that.
That guy Tony said he'd make me one of his regular girls.
He did. He did say that.
Which pimp was this?
I forget his name.
What?
Tony.
It's like Tony Lightning, Tony Thunder.
Oh.
I don't know. He was like Nick's buddy. That he was the MC
for the club for the first
one we did. And he's like, I'll make you one of my regular girls. You want to do this? And I was like, regular girl.
Like bottom bitch.
I don't know. Maybe
a little bit creepy.
Comedians.
He was delightful.
I need to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. You can use Squarespace's template designs for all major content types to suit your needs, including pages, galleries, blogs, commerce, calendars, and more. I actually have new writers who are trying to get into games media and the like ask me how to get their writing out there all the time, and I highly recommend starting a portfolio that includes everything you've ever written, even if it wasn't published anywhere else. Throw it on your fancy Squarespace site and link it on your social channels, and you're already basically 10 steps ahead of most other new writers. If you want to go even bigger, you can also have multiple contributors on one site with your site manager, plus simultaneous posting to automatically post anything written by anyone to Twitter, Facebook, or Tumblr. So, if you want to jump in and start your own Squarespace for this reason, or any other reason you might want a website, because it is very versatile, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/dudesoup to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That is squarespace.com/dudesoup. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this episode of Dude Soup.
Thank you, Tony.
I had
He's not here.
several other subjects, but I kind of figured we would end up talking about stand-up this whole time. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to end this by asking if you guys have recommendations for people who are new to stand-up. Like, what are your favorite specials or specific comedians that you'd recommend to anyone who wants to get into watching stand-up?
To get into watching.
I would to kind of counter the edgelord humor we talked about this whole podcast. I would recommend. I love Steve Martin. Steve Martin's one of my
he's one of the best stand-ups.
My greatest loves of my life. But I would say Ron Funches, because he is such a positive comic. Mm-hmm. Like he definitely does not punch down. He's
like
super,
the Paddington of comics.
He's super sweet, and he definitely punches up, or if not even that, he's not even really punching. And I also love Chelsea Peretti, who she's got a right hook of sass on her. But if you've ever listened to her old podcast, she does this podcast where she takes calls from people, and it's fantastic. People will be super fucking weird, but it never feels like she's mocking them. Mm-hmm. Like, even somebody calls and they're like, hey, I'm just, I'm sitting here on the couch watching Golden Girls with my goat. And she'll go, oh my God, like, your goat is the coolest goat I've ever, like, she never seems to be like.
What episode of Golden Girls?
Yeah. She never seems to be like, oh, I'm going to take that this person's weird and I'm going to run with it and make it a bit. Mm-hmm. No, she finds a way to take it and make humor out of it that's not at that person's expense, and I really, really admire that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Steve Martin, because he's a pretty absurdist comic.
He's a wild and crazy guy.
He always manages to be absurd without being necessarily offensive. Though I guess when you think about The Jerk, it's kind of like a barometer, ever-changing barometer thing. But his stand-up for the most part is he's wacky and he's absurd, so it's not all set up punchline. But he's pretty clean and pretty safe, especially by today's standards for everything, which is a cool thing to strive for. Yeah. Reggie Watts, I've seen his stand-up. It's real good. Yeah. Because he's like the modern version of that, where he's just nonsensical absurd. Mm-hmm. I think Mitch Hedberg is one of the best stand-ups of all time.
R.I.P.
And then, of course, Dave Chappelle is amazing too.
Eddie Izzard's Dress to Kill.
Oh,
I think it's
great.
that's I think technically clean. Most of it, I think it's just he's funny and he's smart. And it's a really nice combo. And then I forget the name of the one, but Dana Carvey's.
Yes.
When he ends it with the chop and brush.
Oh,
and
yeah.
His whole Comedy Central used to just run stand-up bits when I was a kid. I'd get home and just watch them all day.
Dana Carvey just did that 6-episode mini podcast with Conan.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he's doing all these bits, and then eventually at one episode, Conan's like, what paper are you looking at? And I guess Dana Carvey, he would write down do a Jimmy Stewart bit. He wouldn't write notes or dialogue, but he just made little notes. And Conan's like, we're doing a podcast. You don't have to pull out your paper.
Yeah.
But I guess he's an old school comic guy. He's not, a 25-year-old YouTuber that he goes in and does whatever. But he's remarkable. I love him.
Not stand-up comedy, but I would say if you were ever to, probably my all-time favorite comedian of all time was Phil Hartman. Only because the dude never broke.
There's a
watch him do Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer. Watching it today, where he's saying stuff like I think a lot of SNL cast now that people find the humor in the breaking of it, but that dude committed, and just when he's sitting there and he's just got this makeup on and the forehead and brow.
There's a Phil Hartman documentary or something coming out soon.
About Phil Hartman?
Yeah, there's some special or something.
I don't know. I've probably said it before, but I never really get too sad or upset over celebrity deaths because I'm I don't know them also. But I think as a kid I cried when Phil Hartman died because I was he meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I was Simpsons and SNL and stuff. And I was just dude was he was a treasure, and that sucked.
I was the same way when Robin Williams died.
I know, and I saw it. I saw it in theaters. He was also
How
on
was
news.
Robin Williams' stand-up aged?
Oh. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's aged poorly.
But he's electric.
Oh God.
I mean, that's why I used to
Well, did you ever see the? It was the Aladdin making of where they're talking about how they convinced Robin Williams to play the genie. They animated one of his stand-up bits.
Oh no way.
When he's like, "Oh, I'm talking to one of my heads. Here's another head," and then he's like, "Oh wow, that works really well."
Yeah.
They just did a quick little animatic, and it's pretty seamless because Genie is basically a stand-up comedian when you watch Aladdin.
Yeah.
But
I know.
I was just gonna say, you're talking aged in terms of culturally and stuff. I mean, I'm sure if you just watched it right now today, it would be whoa, what are all those voices? How's he doing? He was in a Middle Eastern man's taxi cab, and he's doing the voices and everything like that. But God, it's just it's
so much energy.
Doing a lot of coke
he
and
was very endearing.
He does 120 minutes of stand-up in 80 minutes.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I know someone that was a former aspiring stand-up comic, and they went to they had a set at a club one night, and then Robin Williams showed up and went to the owner and was like, I want to do impromptu stand-up set.
And this was 6 months ago, so it was real weird.
and of course the club owner's not going to be like, oh no, Robin Williams, you can't do this. So this dude had to follow Robin Williams do stand-up. This is probably mid 2000s. And I was like, oh my God, I would have just asked if I could not go up.
Yeah,
if
same.
I would have been like, can he just have my time and I won't do it. After he also made a huge faux pas because he went up to Robin Williams at the bar and was like, I'm a huge fan. Can I buy you a drink? And Robin Williams was like, oh no, that's okay. Or I don't know if he took the drink or not. But then it did come out the next day that he was had just gotten out of rehab or was going to rehab or something for drinking and the guy was like, oh my God, I just
fucked that night up real bad.
Yeah.
I want to throw out honorable mention to Gallagher.
Wait, which one? Which
Brother
one?
Not the brother.
Okay.
The true
okay.
Gallagher.
Oh.
Only because, honestly, as stupid as it is in concept, I used to laugh a lot as a kid when he would just bring out a fruit and go, ah, and you see the people in the front row. I mean, he did a full routine before he would start smashing fruit, but I mean,
Alana,
to be so
among
brave.
other comedians, which Gallagher is your favorite?
Liam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Is that
think
maybe?
Sarah Silverman's new show is really good.
yeah.
It's not stand-up, but it's still.
I Love You,
I Love You,
America.
America.
Yeah.
I think I
Canceled.
canceled though.
Did it?
Emmy
Yeah.
nominated and canceled.
I had no idea. That's crazy.
Yeah, I
show.
think it just had the one season, but it was really good.
Yeah, just a good take on still hot topics, but she never punches down, even though she has the opportunity to.
Yeah.
But yeah, do we anyone else we want to mention before we wrap up?
God, there's so many. I wish I had made a list or
Yeah,
something.
like I said, I mean, it was Comedy Central was one of the greatest
Eddie
comedy
Murphy.
teachers.
Eddie Murphy
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
needs to be
Raw.
mentioned. Yeah. I mean, Richard Pryor and George Carlin are like you could watch those today and they were still.
I did. I watched Richard Pryor, like one of his really old sets, like 2 weeks ago for the first time ever, and was like, it's still great.
Yeah,
still awesome.
Billy Crystal.
Billy Crystal.
Yeah, sure.
I used to listen. Like my dad had Billy Crystal comedy records when I was a kid, so I did listen to them.
Even old Woody Allen's still pretty funny. I mean, it's like he used to do stand up back in the day. It's pretty clean, but it's like it's just a neurotic Jewish guy from New York just talking about his life, and it's like it's pretty good. But
there's
I liked
British comedians that we've left out as well.
Yeah,
too.
no, absolutely.
Oh,
I mean, like I guess Monty Python's more of a sketch show, but
yeah.
even when they did their eulogy or their wake for Graham Chapman, and they kick over the urn, it's just like to the last moment, it's still everything's still a joke to them, and like I don't know, that's what good comedians do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a volatility. Certain people hold comedy in higher regard than numerous other things. And I think that gets people in trouble a lot. I know it's gotten me in trouble that I'm like, but it's comedy. I love comedy. And people are like, but in my life, that's not the most important thing. And you should understand that. And I go, I understand.
Right at a funeral, put your dick away.
Yeah.
It's not that
But
funny.
it was funny.
Yeah. I drew a hat on it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this week's episode of Dude Soup. We will see you all next week.
Buy the t-shirts.
Hey, baby.
Building a little fake area to hide in, a la Clive Owen, then breaking out with all the Nazi gold. Or
jerking off a horse.
Yeah, do we break in and jerk off a horse one night? I don't know.
Is there a black market? This is a good heist movie.
I think we get a couple tall boys. We go out with some lube.
This is
and
good.
We go
We steal horse semen.